Everyone, hope everything is going well. Today we're going to have a few guests on. We have Chris from the YouTube channel Stories and Cardboard, and we have Ryan McClanahan, and it's History Through Sports Cards.
History through cards.
History Through Cards, right? Another great channel. So thanks for coming on, both you guys.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
We've had Ryan on first or a few times, but I wanted my audience to get a feel of what your channel is all about, Chris. Can you tell them for those that haven't seen any of your videos?
Yeah, so as my channel name says, Stories and Cardboard, I think that all cards kind of tell a story. And I try to do videos where it shows the story of cards. And I talk a lot. I'm very similar in the way I collect as Ryan, in that we both love the history. We probably love the history more than modern day sports. And we just love researching the history of the hobby and the history of cards. So that's kind of generally what I talk about.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. And I know both of you are more into vintage. Chris, you told me you're more into vintage football, but we'll do a little bit of show and tell before we get into our main commentary. But Chris, what's your recent pickup that you had? And I think you did a YouTube video on this as well.
Yeah. There we go.
Brooks Robinson.
Yeah. So this was Ryan being a bad influence on me, causing me to spend money. He had honestly, I'd wanted this card since I was a kid, and never got around to buying it. And then Ryan and I have actually talked pretty in depth about this card, and he picked one up. I don't know, when did you get yours, Ryan?
Oh, probably like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
3 or 4 months ago.
And it just kind of motivated me to get serious about picking one up for myself.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Ryan, what have you picked up recently?
Well, quite recently, I've really picked up a lot of 1960s football because I think maybe because of Chris. And I really have studied quite extensively about the ball players from the NFL from the 60s. So that's what I've been doing. And, I'm still going for the cricket cards and the soccer cards as well. So,
okay. Okay, sounds good. I picked up a Luke Kuechly auto. He actually sent it back to my home. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Did he charge?
No, he didn't charge at all. I was shocked that he actually signed it. And it does look similar to his autographs that I've seen on eBay. So, and then I also got a Tim Allen Home Improvement. He signed. Someone said it was fake, but I looked at similar autographs that PSA authenticated. So, unless maybe he could be using a secretary, but I'm keeping it as my PC. So, it is what it is. But speaking of autographs, this was probably one of the craziest stories, actually, after Chris and Ryan had reached out to me. But I did for those that haven't been following, there was a Michael Jordan autograph card. This individual out of Florida sent it to PSA. It was already authenticated, but he wanted probably a grade as well. And PSA said, nah, it's not good. And then PWCC, where he bought it from, would not give him a refund. PSA, I don't think, gives refunds based on autographs if it's a fake card or if it's a fake signature. So he went to a news station. Then PWCC decided to pay them out. And what Chris observed was quite interesting. There's also another YouTube channel that observed what Chris did. They looked at the cert number of this individual originally in the holder, and then they found out, or Chris found out, and this individual found out, that cert numbers before and after, a bunch of them were decertified. So, Chris, just to do you do this often? Do you just look at these cert numbers?
No, that's not something I normally do, but I've collected autographs for a long time. So I kind of know some tricks to kind of sniff out some bad stuff. So that's just one thing that I kind of thought of. It's like, okay, well, let's see if this person potentially submitted some other cards at the same time.
Yeah, I found that fascinating. I never have done that, and my video didn't get that many views. It had maybe a couple hundred, and then what Chris found was just fascinating. I think Ryan also sent me an email as well. And Chris, I think we messaged each other, and you said that you thought, since you are well versed in autographs, you thought that the autographs looked authentic, right?
They're really close. I'd like to see them in hand and get a better look at them. But these are not your typical, if they are forgeries, they're not your typical Michael Jordan forgeries that are really easy to tell. Normally, Jordan autographs are pretty easy. I mean, he's one of the most forged signatures out there, and most people don't have a clue. The forgers really don't do a very good job normally of forging his signature.
Yeah, I don't trust buying a signature of Michael Jordan unless if it's on a check, to be honest, and authenticated. But that's just me. Ryan, so you have, I know you know the history behind sports cards a lot better than most people, and you sent me an email, and you talked about in the past that this is just nothing new. Can you elaborate on some examples that you've seen while covering the sports card hobby?
Yeah, sure. So it looks like the very start of, I guess, sports card forgery was about 1971. And that was a lady who actually forged a card. But then you have 1973. There was a show in which somebody had noticed a stack of 1959 Flair Ted Williams. It was actually Ted signs for 59. Those were actually forged, and they said that they were pretty easily spotted, and the word went out. And so, what's the thing with those cards at the time, and probably even today still, is that that card has Bucky Harris, and he was a general manager of the Red Sox, and he was basically not allowed to. I guess he didn't sign off on his likeness in that set. So there, there are a lot of other cases. I think the biggest case, though, that I've heard about came from Anson Whaley from Pre-War Cards. He did a pretty fairly good job of kind of explaining that there were a bunch of T206 and Playball and Gowdy forged autographs that had, I guess, been they had gone through PSA and were deemed to be authentic. The problem with this is that some of the players from, like, say, the dead ball era were not known to autograph cards, especially during their lifetimes. And so what it was found that the forgers who have never been caught, they used 3x5s to forge the autographs. And one guy in particular, Jack Warhop of the New York Highlanders, he's not known to sign anything. So what it looks like is that the forgers, they're pretty good, but they were doing this, and then I guess with regular T206s or Gaudis, and then they were forging them, and then there was like a side by side that you could see exactly the details within the card, and that's what gave it away. And I'm not entirely sure what the FBI has done about that. I've tried to reach out to the FBI Cyber Crimes Division a couple of times, and I haven't gotten anywhere so far. But there's actually 60 documented cases of that, and Sorry, guys. There we go. There could be more. We just only know of those 60. So that's probably the biggest right now. And then obviously Greg Marino from Operation Bullpen.
Right, right. So I want to ask you, Chris, since you are into autographs, TTM, I'm into TTM. What do you send any of those autos for grading, or is it just part of your PC?
Yeah, I've never sent autographs in for grading, especially for TTM. I mean, there are some that I would potentially do. I think Jose Canseco right now, like for example, I think Jose Canseco is signing for a really small fee. I think if you got that signed and paid his fee and sent that in, it would probably be worth it. A lot of times, it's really not worth sending them in. The price difference in getting it authenticated, because TTM is a whole nother part of the hobby where when you're kind of in that world, you get a pretty good idea of who's signing through the mail, who's not, what they charge, how long they take, things that they won't sign, certain cards that they won't sign, certain team that they won't sign for. Like David Wells does not sign anything but Blue Jays cards.
Wait, David Wells, the guy that pitched on the Yankees?
Yes, he signs nothing but Blue Jays cards.
What? That's crazy. I mean, didn't he have his major accomplishments with the Yankees?
Yeah, I mean, my thought is it's probably all about money someday. Dr. Mike
Scarcity.
Marshall, who was a pitcher for the Dodgers, went several years without signing at all, really, or very little. He'd actually signed a little bit in person in the 70s, but for the most part, he did not sign for a very long time. Then all of a sudden, someone cut a big enough check and he was willing to sign.
Yeah. Yeah, he refused for years and years.
Yeah, I'm just speaking of people that refuse to sign. It seems that the great players, LeBron, Michael Jordan, and then a few others, I don't think they sign too much right now. Is that correct? Would you know about those individuals?
Oh, yeah. Most, they don't sign very much. You have to understand that you're dealing with a few things. You're dealing with agents first and foremost who want to get their cut. And these athletes know what their signatures are worth. So I think the times when they do sign, they are very, very selective. Like one time I was trying to get Michael Jordan's autograph in person, and he shot me down, just cold, shot me down. But then he did sign for, and I was probably, gosh, I think I was like 27, 28 at the time, something like that. And he did sign for a kid, but he signed a hat. And I was actually trying to get something a little more special autographed, and which probably is one of the reasons he didn't sign.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, Michael Jordan's son played against my high school. And Michael Jordan used to actually come to our high school, but they told us, you're not going to go near Michael Jordan. Let him sit, by himself in the corner. And, no one, used to go to him. But I did remember some people that I went to elementary school with. They used to caddy, and Michael Jordan would, probably sign for those individuals. But that's about it. Yeah, he was selective then, and he's selective now. And then I think I remember talking to an individual that went to a camp, Michael Jordan camp, and I think
Flight School.
Is it Fight School or?
It's called Flight School. His basketball. I don't know if he still does it, but yeah, back in the 90s and
in the 90s, yeah,
up into the early 2000s at least. Maybe 2005, 2006 is the last I know of it, but maybe he's still doing it. But yeah, it was called the Flight School, and typically, basically, all the campers were. You paid to go to the school or to the camp, and you got one autograph. You got Jordan to be able to sign one autograph. And what some dealers would do is they would actually pay for some of these kids to go to camp, or pay for half for them to go to camp in exchange for, hey, you get Michael to sign this for me.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if this is true, but I got a message from one individual on Instagram, and he said that they don't authenticate the camp autos. I can't prove that, but I don't know. Have any of you heard of that?
Yeah, no, that's not true. They so typically what they would do is they would have Jordan sitting at a table. The campers would come through and they would have an upper deck representative there to actually put an upper deck hologram on the stuff. And sometimes they would do that, but they would also give you like a flight school COA.
Okay. Because also, speaking of upper deck authenticated Jordan signatures, someone told me, and if anyone could corroborate this in the comments section, let me know, that the cards that were decertified had an upper deck signature or authentication on those cards. Even though it's Fleer, upper deck used to, have some private signings and then used to authenticate it. And the rumblings of these cards, I still have to do more research, is that these cards may have just been fake upper deck stickers that were placed on these cards. But once again, I need more research on that. Have you heard of anything about that?
Yeah, so I did see someone in your comment section who had mentioned something like that. I do know there were maybe back in 2018, 2017, 2018, there were kind of fake flight school. And again, you got the upper deck hologram when you went to the flight school, I believe. But there were fake flight school holograms going around like in 2017, 2018. So I'm wondering if that had something to do with these Jordan rookies.
Yeah, it must be something with that, because I got a message from IG and someone told me that Joe Orlando stopped authenticating these. Once again, I needed more research to say that. The guest I couldn't have on the show, but I would like to have more information. I emailed PSA for more clarification on the story that Chris told me about, and I put it together. Go ahead.
Did they get back to you at all?
Not yet. I wonder if they will. I just want to hear their side of it.
At this point, they probably won't.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, people that usually respond are people from Golden, but that's still sometimes a vague response that I get from them.
So
some of the items.
I'm thinking maybe, and Chris, maybe you can help me out with this. I'm thinking that there's probably one person that sent at least the bulk of these cards into PSA, and then maybe another person sent in like what you said, 4. So it could be like 2 people that sent these in.
Potentially, it could have been. So the cert numbers were pretty far apart. So these were sent. So I did find where they sent 10 in at the same time, but then I found another batch that was sold through PWCC where they had 4 sequential numbers. The numbers were pretty far apart, so they were not sent in near the same time. And it's possible it could have been the same person. It's possible it could have been 2 different people. I mean, the interesting thing is to have that many Jordan rookies to send in at one time that are autographed is really unusual, and really about the only way I could possibly think that happened is if you did have one of these, I like to call them sponsors, if you will, that would pay for these campers to go to the flight school, and they gave them Jordan rookies to get signed. Now, I'm not real clear too. I know with Jordan being an upper deck exclusive, at some point he stopped signing those rookies, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I wonder. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but is Upper Deck the one that came out with the quad card back in 2005 with who was it, with Ty Cobb, Walter Johnson, Babe Ruth, and Honus Wagner? Is that the same company? Because
I think they do those type of autos though.
That was forged back in 2005. So that whoever was buying the autographs was brand new, and I think they had let go of their old authenticator where he left. So that's another problem too with a lot of um, these inexperienced, I should say, people. We don't know um, who has experience when they're judging or deeming a lot of these autographs to be authentic.
Yeah, I mean, I I'm just wondering how many. Speaking of fakes, how many Jordan autos that are authenticated that are not really his signature? And if you are trying to, get it for your collection or you're trying to speculate, how do we know that it's real? I mean, we have the problem with Mickey Mantle. We know there's a lot of fakes out there that are authenticated. And this is, as Chris said, a really high in demand card, and there's many that are forged. So I don't know what process someone would go through to have the confidence that, hey, look, this is the real Michael Jordan signature.
Yeah, so I can speak on that a little bit. Kind of from a buyer standpoint, you have to really educate yourself. Don't just trust the authentication companies. You really have to do your own research and learn about the player, learn about their signing habits, learning about the different things that they sign and the different types of signatures that they have, because player signatures change over time. And so you really have to kind of know your stuff. I do believe that the Upper Deck authenticated stuff is usually pretty safe, especially if you're familiar with his signature. You can usually tell. Again, Jordan's signature is not an easy one to forge. I used to get people pretty frequently that would send me pictures of Jordan autographs and just ask me, what do you think of this? And I could almost 99% of the time, it was instant. I knew that it was fake. Now, admittedly, if someone were to send me these photos of these Jordan rookies, I would have taken a long look. I mean, they're higher quality forgeries if they are indeed forgeries.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, and I'd like to say too that a lot of the T206 forgeries they passed uh, with flying colors with PSA and James Spence and Beckett, and so it wasn't found out until later on, and we don't know again how many of these cards actually slipped through and made it. There could be more forgeries, and the other thing too is again what Chris is saying is correct. If you're going to collect autographs, you really do have to study the ball player and depending on what era the player was living in or signing, you have to really, I would say, even go as far as you know researching the types of instruments that the player could have signed as well, the ink as well, if you really want to get into it. And then some players are, I guess, prior to sports, the card shows. Prior to that, you didn't really have a whole lot of players signing autographs for the most part, or like in the junk wax era. A lot of the guys, I'll show you one example really quickly. This gentleman right here, he died in 1971, and this is Mickey Harris. So um, again, I I kind of trust this autograph. Actually, yeah, I do trust it, but again, you do have to figure out who could sign what and when, and that can be tricky, especially if you're not familiar with the ball player. A lot of those guys that I collect from the 50s and 60s and even before that, a lot of them didn't make it, into the modern era today. And so, I also tend to think too that it's it's the lesser known ball players that are the most rare, not your Ted Williams or your Joe DiMaggios. Those guys signed a lot, Yogi Berra and Bob Feller especially. So, and again, Bob Feller was one of the first ball players to actually do a circuit, if you will, around to other shows and stuff beginning in about 1974. He's the one who opened the floodgates for a lot of these ball players to sign. And the other thing too is since these ball players were they were older, the guys who were around in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, by the time the 1980s rolled around, they were collecting Social Security checks. So they looked at. Sorry about that. I live above a bowling alley, so. So a lot of these guys needed to get some extra cash on hand to support their pensions or Social Security. So that's, again, that's something you might want to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I remember when Mickey Mantle was on the show circuit signing autographs for $10.
Yeah.
And
what
thinking,
year was that? What year was that?
That was the early 80s.
Okay, I wasn't alive. Okay.
Yeah, that was the early 80s. And I remember thinking $10 for an autograph? That's crazy.
I'm sure that was a lot back then too, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Seemed like it for a teenager anyway.
All right. TF San Francisco Giants meme says Pack Pulled Autos is where it's at. Do you two agree with that in terms of those being real?
Yeah.
They can be trusted?
Yeah, I think so. A pack pulled. I mean, it's not like it was back in the 1980s when you had wax packs and you could, flip open the pack itself and then reseal it. I don't think that that's going on anymore. I could be wrong because I haven't opened a pack since George Bush was president. So, 25 years ago. So, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, I think overall that's one of your safest bets, but it's not foolproof either. There have been some instances out there of people having their girlfriend sign the cards and things of that nature. But I think it's pretty rare. And again, this is where having a knowledge of what a player's signature looks like. But unfortunately, today's player, it's 2 lines and a scribble. I mean, yeah. I don't know how you could even possibly authenticate autographs of players today because, 2 lines and a scribble, any 5-year-old can do that.
Yeah. Can I speak on that for a minute? So I think that what Chris is saying really rips off not only the fan, the person who's actually going for the autograph, but also the company too. This is something that really bothers me because not only can those autographs, if you want to call them autographs, be forged really easy, but it also is lazy on the part of the player, and it's really kind of shows disrespect. At least I think so. To have a player just scribble their name, and other players have actually taken notice of this too. A lot of the older guys kind of pulled the younger guys aside and said, "Hey, listen, you guys got to stop doing this stuff, and like take pride in what you're actually doing." Because again, these guys are being paid for this too. It's just I don't see anything good come of that. It's again, I don't sign my signature like chicken scratch. I don't take pride in my own signature, so I'll take a few more seconds to get everything correct. So,
Check this comment by Patches.
Yes.
Willie Mays' wife signed his autos in the 1980s. They're very sharp. I did not know that.
Yes, I actually wrote to Willie Mays in the 80s and got some of those wife signed. At the time, I thought they were Willie Mays autographs. And then as I got older and started learning more about autographs, realized I had his wife who had signed them. And they are very distinctive. It's a completely different signature. Don Zimmer's wife did the exact same thing also. If you wrote to Don Zimmer in the early 2000s to whenever it was he passed away, chances are you got his wife's signature, and you see them pretty frequently in autograph lots or even on eBay where people think they're authentic and they're selling them because they got them through the mail, but in reality, his wife signed them.
How did researchers uncover that it was his wife or their wives that signed these?
That's a good question. You know, I don't know if it's something where Mays ever admitted it or if someone just assumed, hey, someone signing for him had to be his wife kind of thing, maybe. But maybe Ryan knows that. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so this actually goes back to the 1920s with the Yankees. And so you have a number of players throughout the 1920s to the 1950s and 60s who had either clubhouse guys who would do their signatures. For the Yankees, that was Earl Combs, who would sign all the ball players. And then for the Red Sox, it was a guy named Nixon. He was a Willard Nixon. He was a pitcher. And his Ted Williams signature is spot on. It's really, really difficult to find. And then, so Willard Nixon's autograph itself is pretty difficult to find. I do have his autograph from his rookie year, but J. Frank Baker, Home Run Baker, his wife also signed for him. And then so you have a lot of ball players who have like special clubhouse guys, and some bat boys, in fact, have done signatures. And I think the Brooklyn Dodgers, their bat boy, I forget his name right now, from the 50s, he signed a lot of baseballs, and a lot of the Brooklyn Dodgers did not like to sign when they were playing, but afterwards they signed quite a bit. And I think that's also true with a lot of other players like Lefty Gomez. And then it's Joe Jackson as well. His wife also signed, but it's a different story because Joe Jackson could neither read or write. So he basically had his wife signing all of his stuff. And he does.
So wait, are there any authenticated signatures floating out there of Joe Jackson?
There are, and there are also Geronimo signatures as well. And I wouldn't buy a Geronimo signature, to tell you the truth, because it's basically block lettering, and so that's very tricky. You know, but he did sign up until his passing in, I think, 1909.
I've never heard of that. Very interesting. Very interesting. Michael Ham, what's going on? He asks, were Jordan's signatures the same when he played baseball? Do any of you two know?
Yeah, from about his signature was pretty consistent from about 93 to probably 2000 and all the way up into the 2000s. It got a little more abbreviated in the 2000s. There was a brief period where he would kind of connect his signature. That was a very brief time where he did that. That was more like, when was that? I think that was like 90, when was that? Maybe like 92 to 94, maybe, where it was considered his in-person signature. It was kind of the way he signed in person, where he would kind of do a different kind of connect from the last part of his last name. I wish I had an example to show you, but it'd probably take me forever to find it. Where I actually learned a lot about Michael Jordan's signatures was a website called Rare Air 23. And he was a guy who was really, really knowledgeable about Jordan autographs. And he ran a website. He's not really active with it anymore. I think he really kind of gave up doing that probably maybe 15 years ago, maybe longer. But at the time when I was studying his website, he had a lot of great information, and you can still go to his website, and it's kind of patchy with some stuff still on there, but he's got some really great information about the different types of styles that Jordan had when he was signing.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably ties into what you're saying about different signatures. Sign a piece of paper 10 times in a row and see how much it changes. It's crazy.
It will. It will.
And how does an authenticator know that, okay, some guy at a show, his hands get tired, so his signature gets sloppy? Like on a day, you know, if I have to sign something at work or I have to sign a check, my signature is not the same. And sometimes I just get lazy. It's like chicken scratch. So how do you know what's real and what's not if you're an authenticator? And you just authenticate, okay, this matches what we've seen before on hand, and we have documentation to show that it's authentic. I don't know. I'm just, thinking out loud.
Well, they would have lists they'd have examples of the player's signature going back. And obviously I mean, if you sign all day long, your signature is going to change. But if it depends on your mood as well, and the pen or whatever you're signing, that also can affect your signature and what you're signing, the document, if you will. So it all kind of plays into it. And then again, if you're sick or whatever it is the case that may be, that too can change your signature. And your signature obviously changes over time too, as you age.
Yeah, I think that's important to understand that autograph authentication is not an exact science. No. There is no one that is perfect at it. No one is the be all end all and gets it all right every single time. Again, it's just an opinion. Just like a grade with a card, it's an opinion. And you would hope that the people, and I think someone put up here something about transparency, you would hope there would be more transparency in knowing the people that are authenticating these things and what their experience is. But unfortunately, that's just not the case.
These people, we don't know what their backgrounds are. And I've had some issues with SGC in the past with this, and most times forensic document examiners have to go through school basically for like 2 years apprenticeships to be in the positions that they are. And I don't know what the education level is for the authenticators of these third party grading companies, and even James Spence as well. So
yeah, I got James Spence. Speaking of, Pat just says James Spence was an autograph dealer before an authenticator. Now going back, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Generally, the more cards you see, the better educated you will be on what to look for. And the same thing is true for autographs.
Yep.
For the most part, I think.
Exactly. I started collecting autographs through the mail in 1983. Whoa. And in 2000, I started selling some of my autographs that I had. And in that time, you just start learning what autographs look like. And I spent probably a good 10 or 15 years maybe where I would buy collections, and usually from auction houses. And I'd gotten to the point where I was pretty good at being able to pick out the ones that were not bad, because like Ryan said, when you see them enough, and again, you know the guys that are easy signers, and so you can start recognizing trends. It's almost like if you bought a collection, a through the mail collection from the 1980s, there were always the same players. And occasionally you would get one who you didn't see too often, like, for example, someone like an Alan Wiggins.
Yeah, I was just going to say
who passed away. What year did he pass away, Ryan?
1991.
Yeah, that's what I was
Very,
thinking.
very young, 34
Yeah.
years.
But he did sign through the mail, but again, passing away in 1991, he had a shorter window. So it wasn't very often that you would see a guy like that, but occasionally you would see him. But you saw tons of people like Frank Tanana and I'm trying to think of some of these other guys that sign more than pigeons, as Ryan likes to say. But Frank Tanana comes to mind right off the bat, and guys like Jim Clancy, and there are just certain guys that would sign everything you sent to them.
Yeah. Guys that you would never expect anyone to forge their autographs. You know, for me, Johnny Pesky is one of those guys.
Pesky, yeah.
Yep. And Bob Feller. You know, the old saying is if the world were to end tomorrow, the only thing that would survive is pigeons, cockroaches, and Bob Feller's autograph. Just because he signed so much. But he was also, I believe, 90 or so when he passed. So he's got a larger window of time to actually autograph cards, unlike, say, an Alan Wiggins, who I would love to grab his autograph just for the history alone.
Interesting. And going back to variations of autographs, I was reading that I think Abraham Lincoln, someone could quote me on this or correct me. They said that he had 18 different variations of a signature. Someone who was president of the United States a long time ago trying to authenticate his autograph today. I don't know how you do it. I mean, going through 18 variations at least. I mean, that sounds crazy.
Yeah, so for presidents, a little bit different because there's so many documents that those guys had to sign. That
some of those were secretarials.
Yeah, well, that too. So, I do know a guy who specializes in presidential autographs, and some guys are scarcer than others, like James Garfield. But it's just you really have to study this stuff, and there's an auction component as well, with this stuff too. And
presidential autographs is nothing I ever really studied, so I would not be one to authenticate that. But I would imagine it's like baseball or football or any other thing. Again, you have to study this stuff. Too many times I think people depend on the authentication companies to do all of the work, and I think that's not really a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. The ink as well. They study the ink and the
right.
Side,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think that in regards to presidents or even athletes, auto pens, how can the normal guy detect that? Because I'm not trying to get into anyone's politics here, but I did read a story about Trump, and a lot of his autographs over the past few years were auto pens. And I think some of them may have been authenticated by these grading companies. So that's just another layer as well. So it may not be the wife signing. It may not be a forgery. It may just be an auto pen. So it's just, I don't know.
I mean, auto pens have been around since the 1700s. And then more recently, 1940s and 50s. But yeah, that's really, I think, very tricky for a lot of professionals trying to figure out the stuff. And I know there's a way to do it. I just don't know that way.
Yeah, typically, I think everyone maybe, or a lot of people probably watching have probably seen Pawn Stars. Yeah. And the first thing that they do is they put it under magnification to see if it's live ink. And you can tell under magnification if it's live ink. If it's not live ink, it's going to be solid all the way through without any type of break in the ink at all. And also, there are a lot of great resources out there. Like I was telling Rahul about Sports Collectors Net.
Yeah.
If you go on there, costs you $13 a year for a membership. And they have all kinds of things. They have exemplars, like pictures of different people's signatures. And that they've been a website since the year 2000. So they have a lot of information on there, and they have a great message board where a lot of really knowledgeable people kind of share information and things like that. And stuff like that, people start sharing information where you start knowing who's sending out auto pens. Like Joe Montana in the early 90s, he had an auto pen, and it's very distinct. Most people that know anything about autographs, if they see a Joe Montana autograph, his auto pen variation, it's very easy to spot. It's an instant thing where you see it and you instantly know that's Montana's auto pen.
Okay. Interesting. Now I wanted to ask you, what's the strangest signature that you've seen? Maybe it's in your collection or that you've seen online. I'll tell you that one of the first autographs that I got was one of the guys I liked watching as a kid is Ryan Sandberg. His autograph is unique. One of the most unique autos that I've ever seen. I think I have another autograph as well. I just can't think on the top of my head of another guy, but what about you two? What's the most unique autograph you've seen?
I'll
say right off the bat, Duffy Lewis has just an incredible looking signature.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful. I mean, you talk about taking your time to sign your name. He really beautiful signature.
Yeah, I'd say that too. Charlie Gehringer is another guy.
Yes.
Yeah, he was always very, very good. He always took his time, and his signature is legible. But those guys are rather unique in a way. The guys from like the 1930s and 40s and 50s, because you do see guys today that do sign very nicely, but it's few and far between. There's for me personally, there's a guy Oscar Melolo, and he signed not often, but he did sign, and his signature is quite nice. So
yeah, I have I think the neatest autograph that I have, assuming that it is not an auto pen, is Eric Dickerson. He charged, I think, $10, and it was the neatest signature that I've ever seen. And
it's most likely authentic. Eric Dickerson.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I looked online. It seemed authentic, but I don't know about you two. What's the neatest autograph that you've seen, collection, or you've seen online through your research?
Jack Johnson is another guy, the boxer. He's got a nice signature. I'm trying to think from my own personal collection. Ronald Reagan, another one.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think Ted Williams has a beautiful signature.
Well, which one is it? Ted or is his son?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, his son kind of was, and now his son was trying to make money off of him right up to the point that Ted Williams died.
Yeah,
which is really sad. But yeah, Ted Williams has a beautiful signature. Gosh, a lot of your older players really do. So there are some guys from the 70s too. I'm trying to think of some guys, but yeah, I don't know. I've seen so many signatures. Not too many really stand out to me as being real unique.
What's his name? I like Bob Cousy's autograph. He also did an inscription too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, and I don't think he signs all the time. So
no, I think he just retired from signing. I think he turned 95 not too long ago.
Yeah, my buddy here in the chat, John, he tried to send it via the mail, and then they said he's too old, he's not going to sign, from one of his relatives. It was weird because it was like a month, 2 months afterwards. So,
yeah, a lot of players will do that once they get to a certain age, and some guys you send to them when they start advancing in age, and you can tell when you get it back because their signature is really shaky. And at that point, I feel like people should really stop sending requests to these guys because they're obviously laboring, but they appreciate the people remembering them, so they want to do it for the fans.
Yeah, I mean, at that age, I could understand that point where you don't want to bother them, but then I think they probably appreciate that. Hey, someone still remembers me. Someone that's younger still wants my autograph.
Yeah.
So someone gave. Go ahead.
That's right. There was a Pirates pitcher back in the 50s, Chris Chambers. He had a stroke, and people still kept on asking for his autograph. And when you see one of his autographs, and they do have, they do authenticate these. I can't tell if it's actually Chris Chambers, but because of the stroke, you can definitely tell that it's just so shaky that it really doesn't look like anything that he would have signed prior to it.
Did PSA authenticate those, or no? The ones after the stroke. Okay, so they knew. Okay, that was much different. That's
Carl Hubble is an example of that too. Carl Hubble, a pitcher from the 30s, he has two autographs. He had a stroke in 1977, so the two signatures that he has are very distinct. They call them pre-stroke signature, and then his after-stroke signature. And I think he passed away. What was it, Ryan? Do you know? 88 was.
Yeah, 1988.
Yeah. So he passed away in 88. So he had 11 years where he was signing after, but his signature looked pretty good. His after stroke signature is still a pretty nice looking signature.
It depends on the stroke and how severe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Auburn 35. Ryan, are you familiar with Cord Monroe, a recent FBI case related to T-206 forgeries? I don't remember if that's the guy that you talked about earlier, or is it a different individual?
I'm not actually. I'd love to learn more about that.
Okay. So, do you, Chris, do you still do TTM, or you're done with that?
I do it rarely.
What was the last one you did?
The last one I actually did was about 7 or 8 months ago. I sent to Ken Anderson of the Bengals, and he did. Ken Anderson has been a guy who's kind of gone off and on for a number of years. There are times when he's signing, and then there's times when he's not. So that was the last one I sent. For me, I kind of, again, I started doing TTM in 1983, and I've just sent out so many autographs. It's just at a point you've gotten everybody that signs through the mail, really. Now there are some people I would potentially, like, I've thought about sending an 86 Donruss Jose Canseco and paying his fee, because I think that would be a pretty cool one to get. So I think most of the TTMs I would do right now would be the guys that charge a small fee.
Yeah.
I'll say this, as far as a fee, a lot of people tend to think, oh, that's too much. They're charging too much. Well, I'll tell you, almost in every case, just pay it, because in 10 years, it's not going to look like it was too much. I remember when Yogi Berra would sign through the mail for $10. And I thought, man, that seems a little high. Yeah, no, it's not.
I mean, I think Reggie Jackson, he accepts it. I think it's like something crazy. It's like 125 for his rookie, which may make sense. I don't blame him. You know, he has the right to charge whatever he wants, and then $100 for his non-rookie card.
Yeah, you see that with a lot of guys now, charging more for their rookie.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you two heard this. You know, there's rumblings. I even emailed TriStar to see if this was true, that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you had to pay a fee, but then his agent would be allegedly examining the card, and there'd be a surcharge oh, I think this is a PSA 7, so I'm going to charge you
Wow.
X. As a PSA 8, then I'm going to charge you this. I don't know. Once again, I can't corroborate this, but there were a lot of rumblings going on about that regarding Kareem.
I've heard some stories about his last signing that are not good. Typically, Kareem would just sign Abdul-Jabbar when he signs his autograph, and he was charging a crazy, I forget what the charge was, maybe someone else knows, but at the National this year, he was charging a crazy sum to sign Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Wow.
Wow. Well, what about Luol Cinder, or what's his first name?
He won't
do that. Yeah. I mean, are there any signatures of his first name?
I'm sure there are.
They're pretty rare.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I've ever seen one. I don't think I have seen one, but I think stuff like that would probably you're going to see that on something like maybe a program, a basketball program, or a document or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it must be, like you said, a contract, and just trying to get that contract of his original name. I wonder how much that would go on one of these auction sites, assuming that is legit signature. And I'm just thinking, who had a name change as well? Muhammad Ali's first name used to be
Cassius Clay.
Yeah, Cassius Clay. How many Cassius Clay did he sign?
Those are actually a little more I wouldn't say common, but yeah. I've definitely seen those. Those are out there, and they do bring a premium.
Yeah. And it's just,
there's also something else too, where you have guys like Bill Russell. He's no longer around, but when he was signing, I used to see him all the time and have some pretty interesting conversations with him. However, he would charge like, I think maybe like $800 or so at one point in time. And
which guy?
Bill Russell.
Oh, Bill Russell. Okay. Yeah.
So it was quite expensive to get his autograph. Now the thing is, I'm not entirely sure like how some players they'll charge a lot, like probably too much, but it's all supply and demand too. And some of these players have actually had to lower their fees because not enough people want their autograph. So like I know like Tom Brady he charges quite a bit too.
Yeah.
Some of these guys they may not realize the supply and demand of their autograph too.
I mean, like going back to Ryan Sandberg. Ryan Sandberg, you mail it to his house, who lives an hour away from me, $10. I mean, the supply is ridiculously high, but I still want it.
And that's a guy who could get way more than $10. So
exactly. I would pay him more.
Yeah, he's doing a service for the fans, which is great.
Yeah. Yep. And there's so many comments here. Let's see.
I have seen that Lynn Swann signature. It is a very unique signature where in the S in his last name, he makes it in the shape of a swan.
I need to get that auto now. I wonder if he does TTM. I may just do that just to get his auto.
He doesn't do TTM. He's a pretty tough signature, actually. He doesn't do a whole lot of signing.
Oh, he doesn't? I have to get it online then.
You think that football players are more difficult to get autographed? Especially, I know guys from like the 1940s and 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I think overall they are, for sure. But you have some guys. There were a lot of guys from the 50s that were really good signers for a number of years. Chuck Bednarik was a great signer. Elroy Crazy Legs Hurst was a great signer. There were a lot of guys that really were fan friendly right up until the time that they passed away. But then you also had some guys that were just a lot tougher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Collecting football autographs through the mail did not become popular. Kind of baseball, I think, really started kicking in the 70s when it became really, really popular. Now, there were people doing it before then, even in the 50s, 60s, and I've heard of 30s and 40s people sending TTM requests. Yeah. But it really took off for baseball in the 70s, I think. But football, kind of like cards, it kind of lagged behind, and it was not a common thing to send to players in the 70s and 80s for football autographs.
Yeah, so I got a really interesting story about this. Back in the 1920s, there were those 3 players that they have cards in the 1926 Spalding Champion set, and the company actually sent each player 500 cards. I think maybe in lieu of like payment or something like that. But Joe Sewell, he was one of the players that he would sign his card really kind of as like a business card for anyone who wanted it. So you do have like Joe Sewell, and I think Sam Rice was the other, and Robert Moranville. So those 3 guys signed those cards. You're going to see a lot more of those cards autographed because they did sign those their copies to send out to people. I think that's kind of rare, though. I don't think you see that too often.
Indeed. Before I'll have to go in a minute or two, but before I do, any other thoughts on autographs before we end this? I know it's such a vague question, but I'll start with Chris.
Yeah, so for me, I think, first of all, if you're a buyer of autographs, beware of the FOMO. I mean, we talk about FOMO with cards, but it's even worse with autographs because you want it to be real. And don't be afraid to walk away from it. Use common sense. There are things that you might see that a seller says, and you just know, something's not right about this. Walk away. You should feel pretty confident that what you're buying is real. And if you're not, don't buy it. You don't have to buy it. And from a seller standpoint, don't sell anything if you don't have a pretty good pretty good knowledge in that area. People who don't know autographs should not be selling them. It's not a good thing because they don't know what they're doing, and they'll try to pass it off as, oh, well, I didn't know, I sold it as unauthenticated, and this is your reputation. You should not sell something that you think is going to harm your reputation.
That reminds me of Chasing Cardboard. I don't know if you two have been paying attention to that on YouTube. But Ryan, your last thoughts on autographs?
So I always get a second opinion, usually from Chris, on autographs or cards. Even if I'm not sure about something, I will walk away. And I always tell people, your gut feeling, your initial instinct is usually the right one. And too many people actually, they don't listen to their instincts, their gut feeling on a lot of this stuff, whether it be cards or autographs. The other thing too is, with the hobby, it's obviously fun to collect and grab cards, but at the same time, you really need to pay attention and study. And there was one thing where Indiana Jones in one of the movies, I think it was The Last Crusade, where Indiana Jones says, 80% of archaeology is done in the library. And I kind of want to say that that's true with the hobby as well. I spend a lot of my time actually researching a lot of the ball players and the cards themselves. And so, again, if I'm not terribly familiar with a card, because there are cards that I've never seen actually, I will get a second. So, just keep that in mind.
Yep, very good points. And this was a really nice live stream that I had with both of you. And before we go, once again, Chris, where can people find you?
I'm pretty inactive on social media, so the only place is Stories in Cardboard on YouTube.
All right. And then Ryan, where can people find you?
historythroughcards.com or History Through Cards shortcut on YouTube.
Awesome. Make sure to subscribe to these great channels out there. And we should probably do this another time. We could talk about whatever in the coming months ahead.
Sounds good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thanks
Talk to you
for all.
later.
All right.
See
Take
ya.
care.
Bye.